Good Friday morning, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Finding God in the Dark podcast. I'm Don.
Hi, I'm Jonathan.
And this week I think what we're going to end up doing is kind of doing the chosen every other week just so that we have more time to get
I'm
all of
just
the
to
episodes
watch.
in
Yeah.
because we're not really dedicated binge watchers. So,
Well, and they're getting longer, which is great, but every season they're like 15 minutes longer. It's like,
yeah. So it's a bigger chunk of time. So we're not doing the chosen this week. We are going to talk about a 2011, is that
yeah.
right? 2011 film, written for the screen, produced and directed by Emilio Estevez, starring Emilio Estevez and his father Martin Sheen.
Yeah.
It is called The Way.
Yeah.
Um, I get just kind of a synopsis of the film before we jump into the themes and stuff. The basic premise is it's the son of Emilio Estevez is the son of a doctor. He wants to travel and just go and see the world, and he is on the first day of this journey on this Camino del Santiago. Is that correct?
Yes, it's in English it'll be easier for us. It just means the way of James.
The Way of James.
Yeah.
And he dies in the French mountains. And so the story is basically about his father trying to find out what happened to him and sort of walk in his footsteps to really understand his son. So it is a journey of discovery. I think before we even get into the themes, there was one thing that really struck me, and I wanted to ask you about this. Do you see this film as a religious film about self-discovery, or do you see it as a road movie wrapped in religious trappings?
I would have said the latter um, until the end. I feel
Mm,
like the end when they entered the church and the guy who was oddly on this walk of faith that literally Christians have been doing for at least 1300 years from
hmm.
all over Europe. They've come to this place where it's believed to be the burial place of James the Greater, one of the disciples of Jesus.
Hmm.
And I would have said, yeah, it's kind of a road movie that's kind of skeptical about faith, but kind of just as. But at the very end, and we could talk about it a little more, one of the people that are probably the most skeptical of this whole religious idea, steps into the church, this cathedral, and clearly has a religious experience, has this moment where kind of God goes, no, no, I would like to have a relationship with you. And to me, they all really have that, but he has a significant one. And to me, it is about faith, maybe about skepticism working itself out. And I've actually listened a little bit to Emilio Estevez talk about this movie. And he sounds like he basically decided to do it because he wanted Martin Sheen, his father, to do the way with him, and he couldn't get him to do the way, take a month and do the way. So he literally built a film around it so he would do it.
The film, so dad would do what he said.
Yep.
Yeah, I kind of saw it the same way. Like it was sort of overt religiosity without any real faith up until the very end of the film. Yeah. But let's talk about some of the themes because this film is really steeped in a lot of very interesting stuff. Where do you want to start, John?
I don't know. I think it's interesting for especially Protestants as we are to think about the long tradition of Christianity that emphasized the importance of going on pilgrimage. Since most of our parishioners never have,
Right.
and except for the time I went to Israel, I've never gone. I mean, going to Israel would be considered a pilgrimage, so that's.
Same.
But
Yeah.
but this idea of this being important is a very deep part of Christianity, and yet for some reason it has lost its teeth when it comes to Protestantism. So.
Yeah. I've been to Holy Land twice, and both were amazing experiences. Like I may have even said this on the pod before, that there's a reason that companies like Educational Opportunities Tours calls the Holy Land the fifth gospel.
Yeah,
Because you really genuinely feel like you understand it more when you have been there and you have walked those streets and you've been to those places, even though in so many of those places, just a succession of churches have been built on top of one another over the years. But still, there's just a certain sacredness to it all.
yeah, and
Yeah,
I think you have to be comfortable with the reality. If you go on pilgrimage, you have to be comfortable with the reality that commerce has built up around it, right?
right.
And so, for example, when I went to Israel, the same thing probably happened to you, especially when we went to the occupied territory, Palestine area.
West
Like
Bank, yeah.
when we drove in there with our bus, we had like 20 people trying to sell us things the entire time. They literally
Hmm.
would get on their bikes and follow us to wherever we went. And
Yeah.
then when we got out of the bus, they were trying to sell us stuff. And that can honestly get in the way. You get frustrated and you go like, I'm just here to try to experience this place and soak in this idea of Jesus being here. Could you please not try to sell me this fifth hand knockoff that probably you made in your, you know,
I I don't need a keffiyeh or a scarf. Yeah, I know. And they even go. I don't know if you had this experience, but even gone so far as to hand you the thing,
yeah,
and then when you take it, then they expect you to pay them. It's like,
yeah,
no, I didn't. You
yeah,
give it to me. I don't want it.
yeah. But I do think, at least in my experience, and I am hoping to do more, but in my experience in Israel, there were still these moments, even in the midst of kind of the frustration of that everything's been built up around the idea of you coming. Um, you still get these powerful moments that I really feel like you kind of get the veil ripped open and you kind of experience a, almost an encounter with God. Like, for me, that moment was stepping into the synagogue at Capernaum, where they still have the boundaries marked out, and so we know that Jesus stood in this 200, probably 220 by 20 foot space, like, and he was here, and he would, and to me there was just this moment of power there, like you were like, oh my God, like Jesus was here, like
Yeah.
it isn't abstract. He literally stood somewhere within shouting range, those moments are powerful, and that's why I think the church encouraged people to go on pilgrimages, because they kind of, it breaks you out of your norm, forces you to live and act and think in a different way, and that can be often a time where God encounters you.
Yeah, I had a similar experience for my part when we were at the beach at the Shrine of Peter's Primacy. So this is the northern shore of Sea of Galilee, and it's the place where Jesus had that discussion with Peter after the resurrection. If you do you love me, feed my sheep, and I had the same kind of like. Okay, I found a spot on that beach where I could sit and there was no one else, like even in my peripheral vision.
Yeah,
And I just, you could, it's like going to Gettysburg. You can just feel the energy of it all. If you've ever been to Gettysburg, it's the same kind of thing. There's an energy to that place that just resonates. And it's the same in the Holy Land, in many, many places in the Holy Land. So yeah, I think for our part as pastors, I think we'd probably agree that if there are people in our churches who have not had opportunity to do that trip and feel like they can, it is a bit of walking.
yeah,
Understand that. But if you feel like you could do it, man, take an opportunity and do it. Um, call me. I'll hook you up with somebody who does tours, and they're safe and they're wonderful tours, that the two I've been on. So
yeah, 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 absolutely. Was there anything that kind of stood out for you in this movie?
I really love the idea, and I don't. It's kind of an amalgamation of a couple of ideas that you had thrown at me. But this whole sense of Martin Sheen's character, who is he? Tom.
Yeah,
Tom is the father, right?
yeah,
Um, doesn't really know his son.
yeah.
And this whole journey is this journey of discovery, of finding out what it was that was important to his son. And as a dad, I mean, that
Oh yeah.
that gets you right here, you know?
Yeah, to me, again, I'll step into something I said because I think it speaks to it.
Sure.
But we forget that we carry people with us. Like I think we feel their presence after they pass, but I would argue we carry people with us even when they're alive. You
Yeah.
know, they're how they've impacted us, how they've helped us see the world, the bad and the good things that they've done to us and for us. And it shapes kind of who we are. And that's one of the beautiful things I thought about this movie was Emilio Estevez, his character Daniel, the son, dies really early in the movie. Actually, dies off screen. We
Hmm.
see his body,
Yeah, you
but
don't even meet him. You don't even meet him before he dies. Like he doesn't show up in the film before he dies.
throughout the movie though, and even on the way when he's on the Compostela, when he's walking to the cathedral, um, he encounters his son. His son appears
Yeah.
on the way. And to me, that was a beautiful reminder that we carry people with us. That they don't disappear. I again, this can be seen, I guess, as wishful thinking, but I really believe it's true. I think we souls get attached to us in some way. Like they seem to still be here sometimes, and we experience them when we're open to them. And that's again a powerful part of being a pilgrim is being thrown out of your comfort zone to do things that are hard and to do things that are radically different and being in a place that's radically different for you. It makes you uneasy enough that I think it does open up your mind and your heart to see things and experience things you usually would be just too busy to catch.
And while we're sitting here spiritualizing that, which is, no complaint, right? That's true. In a very literal sense, Tom carries his son
Yes.
on this thing because he has his body cremated and takes his ashes. And there's another idea in that he's spreading his ashes all along the way. That you wanted to say something about the first time he did that because it was right. That was the first moment when we saw Daniel, the son,
Yeah. Mhm.
right? We saw him in the distance.
Yes. And he's almost beckoning him on, which was
Right.
interesting. And I thought it was interesting, at least it appeared, that they present that he basically puts the ashes, he takes some ashes out, he puts it around this cross which seems to be a place that someone marked where they found his body. Almost like this is where this guy died
It
and we want
it's
to remember him, you
it's
know.
certainly implied. It
Yeah.
certainly feels like it's implied. Yeah.
And then he appears, Tom, the father, Martin Sheen's character, seems to just stay there all day, almost not leaving, right?
Hmm.
Until it gets so dark, he kind of he realizes, I've got to get somewhere to stay overnight, kind of thing. And I don't know, I think we live in a time which is wonderful. We're very scientifically minded, we're very intellectually minded, but Christianity has this belief that there's something deeper going on in life than just the material
Oh
and
yeah.
the things we can see, taste, touch, and that there's
Yeah.
something deeper. And I really do like movies that open you up to that possibility, right? Of taking seriously the idea of a soul, taking seriously the idea of the spiritual and the supernatural. And I don't know, it was this beautiful idea of that their relationship was going to be healed through this process, right? Through him doing this and opening himself up to faith again, opening himself up to challenge again. He was going to grow, and he was going to fix his relationship with his dead son. One of the first images of uh, Martin Sheen does an encounter as he's kind of driving to the airport. he remembers an encounter he had when he was taking his son to the airport, and his son said to him, or Tom said, the Martin Sheen character says to Emilio Estevez's character, he says, you may not like it, but this is the life I've built or I've created. And his son's response was, "You don't create a life, you live one." And I really that struck me hard. It was just like, yeah, we oftentimes think about life as something we construct instead of how are you actually living into what life is.
Yeah, is life what you make it, or is life what happens to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a philosophical question that, I've heard many times before. Um, yeah, leaving something. You talked about leaving something behind on the journey. What do you
Yeah,
want to say there?
again, this is something that, again, when you do pilgrimages, there are these things, if they've lasted long enough, and this one, again, has been around for 1,300 years, um, things are created that the community creates so that everybody can kind of share in this memory together and leave something behind. It's just something you see over and over again when you look at pilgrimages. And in this pilgrimage, right toward the end, right before you get to the cathedral, they have a pile of rocks. And people have written notes on the rocks. They've tied pieces of paper around the rock. It's clearly this moment of, what did you take on this journey and what do you want to leave here? You know, this idea almost of giving God, leaving something at the feet of the cross is basically what the idea is, right? And I don't know. I think that idea is very powerful. And I try to create spaces, you may to do this too, in worship sometimes, so people can do that. So people can have that kind of experience where it's like, okay, you've been carrying this thing around. Why don't you let God have it and let it go? Um,
And there's another image that came to mind in that scene, okay? And you probably know this one in the Old Testament or in ancient times, when a place was of some significance, they would build a monument out of stone called an Ebenezer.
yeah,
And for the life of me, the name of the song is escaping me right now, but the first line of the second verse of the song, "Here I raise mine Ebenezer."
yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's
is it How Firm a Foundation or something like
no,
it's
no,
something
no.
like that?
It's actually written by a guy who struggled with alcoholism, and he was had fallen back into alcoholism, and then someone that was witnessing to him sang him one of his songs, and so it's this moment of he realizes God's using using my own song to reach
Great
out to
song.
me, right?
Well, that was the imagery that I saw, right? Here I raise mine Ebenezer. This is a monument. All of these stones that people have carried all along the way and left here is a monument to how it has changed so many lives, which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah,
Um,
there was a lot of I don't know, there was a lot of depth in that scene. You have the Martin Sheen character have to read an ancient prayer that one of the other characters wanted to read when she put her stone down but couldn't get the words out. So
mhm.
she was just going to put the piece of paper down with the stone and he picked it up and read it. So it's this idea of to go through the process of healing and salvation, we need each other. Like it was this kind
So,
of beautiful movement of we need a community.
how,
You know,
how many times have you done a funeral where, somebody wrote something about their loved one and couldn't read it and they asked someone else to read it? Same kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And well, since you mentioned that other character, what was her name? Sarah.
Sorry, yeah. So,
Yeah, you wanted to there was something you wanted to say about her story. Because it's interesting that, it takes this
oh,
journey for all of these characters to kind of get to their motivations, right?
yeah, and
And to
that's
their stories.
and that's the idea of this walk, the Compostelo. There's this idea kind of flushed in it, a couple things. one, there's a deep belief that miracles happen on this walk, that amazing things happen to people. And Emilio Estevez actually, when in a discussion, talked about the fact he took his youngest son, kind of kicking and screaming. He's like, "I want you to do this with me." And the first or second night on the trip, the innkeeper's daughter walks in to give them something. He falls in love with her, and they're still married and they have kids. Like, so he talked, this idea of a miracle. But the other idea is that you start the journey in a different place than you end it. That you realized something else was happening in your life, and God was working out something else in your life, and so you see it differently when you end. And you get to see that with all the characters. They all say early on, because there's a writer with them, and the writer asks, what are you doing this for? And they all give an answer. And what's beautiful is at the end, they are asked that question by the people at the cathedral, where they'll get a Latin certificate explaining that they've done this, done the walk. And they all change their answer. They all have recognized that something else happened. And then you get this beautiful moment where Sarah has been gruff and pushing people off. She called Martin Sheen. For most of the movie, she just calls him Boomer. She never calls him by his name. Like she's angry, she's bitter, she slaps him at one point. Like there's just this level of anger. And then at just in a random moment, they're walking, and she just like turns to him and shares the story of the fact that she was in an abusive relationship, and she was so worried about bringing a child into this abusive relationship that she decided to have an abortion. And you get this beautiful moment of him expressing grief for her and like listening to her, and then that that buddies up to the fact when she's been telling everybody the whole time she's gone on this to give up smoking, and then she puts her rock down. She has this powerful experience where she can't say the words, but Sheen says them for her. And then, like 5 minutes later, she's smoking a cigarette, and she's like, "We all know this wasn't about giving up cigarettes."
About this, yeah.
Yeah,
I thought there was a really powerful scene there as well when she told that story, that she aborted her child, but she says she still hears her daughter's voice, even though her daughter never took a breath. And Tom says, well, I lost my son, but he had 40 years of life, and she said he's still your baby.
yeah,
And I was like, oh,
yeah. It was, and like the character Jake from Ireland, the writer,
writer.
who says at one point along the way, and I've done a deep dive into this because I'm really considering doing it in a year or two. Say I'm going to see how much money it is and all this stuff. There are 8 official routes because again, people came from all over Europe, and that you can get credit for doing the Compostela, for doing the walk. You can get a certificate. You can get the stamps. And the way they walk is called the French way, because it starts in France and goes through the northern part of Spain, and that's kind of what they focus on. And this writer is clearly he hates the fact that he's still writing for travel magazines and has to write travel books. So he's kind of down on this. He thinks it's pointless to write another book about this travel because so many people have gone on it, so many people have written a book. He even talks about what he thinks the greatest one is, and it's hundreds of years old. So why would I write another one? And he's really just very closed off. He clearly, you get this sense of thinking he's better than everybody else, thinking everybody else is kind of silly for wanting to do this. And throughout these journeys, there are sites throughout the way that you can stop at. And of course, there are churches on the way that you can stop at, very beautiful and old churches. And one of the things most people do is you go into one of these churches, you get a stamp, you look around, what you would normally do on a pilgrimage. And a couple times they go into a church and invite him in, and he says, no, no. And one time he says specifically, essentially, I'm guessing, talking about the abuse scandal in the Catholic Church. It appears to be. He basically goes, uh, churches are just a valley of, or just a tower of tears. I don't
Temple of
go into
Tears. He says he calls it a temple of
the temple of
tears.
tears. I
Yeah,
don't go into them anymore.
I go in them. Yeah,
And then at the very end, he goes into the cathedral and has this kind of spiritual moment, this kind of this catharsis where he
yeah.
cries, he clearly kind of encounters God in a powerful way. I don't know, it was just this kind of beautiful moment of kind of this person working out that the church had hurt him or the church had hurt people he cared about, and yet God still finds a way. God still uses this very broken, imperfect reality of the church to still be a means of grace.
Is that some kind of message that our society needs to hear today?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't tell you how often I've been involved in like, social media sites or something. And you don't want to tell people what you do because immediately, you're a pastor, you're a kitty diddler, you love little kids. No,
Yeah. Yeah.
like you realize that is a very fraction of a percentage of actual clergy that have done that sort of thing, right? Uh,
You know, and,
but
and and I thought it was really
which
beautiful.
which wait, which by the way doesn't excuse it. I'm
No,
not
no, no,
excusing it.
no. And people who have been hurt that way have every reason to keep the church at a distance.
Sure.
What's sad is that um, the church has always been broken, will always be broken because it's made up of broken people.
Broken people.
But
Yep.
yet, God has chosen in God's infinite wisdom to use this broken building and these broken places to pour out grace and love.
Yeah.
And I really thought it was beautiful that Yost, one of the other characters in the movie, he actually does what is traditional, which is you kneel and you go to this statue of James, and essentially you say thank you for being on this journey with me, kind of thing. And that was a very powerful scene too, because again, he the whole time he's like, I'm just trying to get in shape. I'm just trying to get in shape. I'm just trying to get in shape. And then at the very end, you learn that one of his motivations is his wife has kind of pushed him away because of his weight loss or his weight gain. I mean, and so he's struggling. He's struggling even deeper than we thought he was. We thought he was just doing this because he wanted to get in shape, but again, there was something deeper going on.
Yeah, and interestingly at the end, it's like all of them they realize that, my stated goals were not at the end because at the beginning when he said he was doing it because he needed to lose weight, Tom said to him, why don't you just buy a new suit?
Yeah,
And at the end he says, I guess I need a new suit. It's
yeah.
just yeah. I I look, we do have to wrap up a little bit. We covered a lot of ground here too. I want to thank you for suggesting this film because I really, really like this was a powerful film.
No, I was actually worried about it because for about a couple months now, for some reason, I've been thinking about exploring doing this, and there's a shorter way that you start from England, and it takes about a week. You walk a little bit in England, and then you come over and finish your walk. In Spain, there's a shorter way if you go from Portugal into Spain, and I've been really thinking about doing this in part because I want to get in shape, and I was really worried about watching this movie because I'm like, if I hate this movie, it's going to sour me on this idea, right? Because I'm starting to
Sure.
get momentum about it. And the reality is, this movie was like, no, 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 I'm doing this now.
It's this film is powerful. And like I said at the beginning, I think for a lot of the film, you're going to feel like it's a road movie with religious trappings. But when it nails the landing,
Yes.
I think it hits hard, and it hits hard for people of faith. I think this is a good film to see.
Well,
Um,
my guess is, and like I said, I haven't talked to Estevez, of course, but I get this
what you
sense.
want his number? I'll
Sounds good. But I do get this sense that he wants to take seriously the reality that in the world we live in, there's a deep skepticism of spirituality. There's a deep skepticism of there being the supernatural and there being kind of something deeper to life than what we can simply taste, see, and touch and feel, you know. And I think he did a great job in this movie of saying, okay, you can start there, but going through these experiences, you almost get a sense that he almost might have started there. Like the first time I did this or whatever, I was kind of closed off to it. His grandfather is from Spain, and so you could see like going, I just want to do this because this is a big thing in Spain. And then you get a sense that he was changed by doing it. And so he wanted to kind of take us on a journey where we see people being changed by doing this.
Yeah, almost as if his real life character might have been James the Irish guy, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
in a sense. Yeah.
yeah.
So all right, I think that's gonna probably wrap up our talk for, final thoughts. I would say, gosh, watch this film. We did discuss right before we started recording that if commercials bother you, right now it is free on Peacock, but it is full of commercials. So if commercials bother you, you can pay like 350 and watch it on Prime.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
but
I it's actually one of the best experiences I've had for a while watching a movie. So I really encourage people to watch it.
yeah, I'm not far off from that. I really, really did enjoy this. So that is the way. As far as next week, um, you're going on vacation, am I right?
I am going on vacation. Yeah.
Okay, so we have an episode in, well, I would say in my back pocket, but it's actually on my external hard drive. Uh, we have an episode in the can that I will publish next week, and that includes well, I would say a mystery guest, but he's been on with us before. He started this thing with me. He's just a really busy guy right now. But we recorded a live episode together last week when we were at our annual conference in Wildwood. So I'll publish that next week. And then the following week, we will catch up, and I think we'll be on season 4 of The Chosen.
Yeah, and just if you want to watch the movie we're going to talk about, it's Babel. So
Yeah, the movie we're going to talk about next week, which we've already discussed,
yeah,
is Babel. I might even watch it.
yeah, that's right. You didn't watch it.
I didn't watch it.
You know what? You no, I'm gonna give you. You have to add a 5 minute commentary on the end of it where you talk about your opinion of the movie.
I'll see what I can do.
That's your assignment. That's your assignment.
But yeah, so if you want to see mostly Jonathan and Evan talk about Babel, that'll be next week's episode. While I sit there and go, yeah,
Yeah.
All right, friends. Thanks for watching. If you are finding any of this informative, engaging, interesting, please do follow and subscribe down below. And go out and see this film the way. It's well worth your time. Until next week, friends, keep on finding God in the dark. We'll see you all next Friday. Bye. Friends, thank you again for watching the Finding God in the Dark podcast. If you're finding these discussions helpful or meaningful in your Christian walk, then we'd invite you to go ahead and subscribe down below. Get more of this content. We publish every Friday morning at 10 a.m. And we're so glad that you can be with us and enjoy these discussions as well. Take care and God bless. Bye now.